I stayed quiet for 7 years while my husband humiliated me in front of his family, made decisions without consulting me, and treated me like I was invisible in my own home. Everyone thought my silence meant weakness, that I was too timid, too passive, too broken to fight back. They were wrong. My silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation. It was me watching, learning, documenting every mistake, every lie, every moment of cruelty. And when I finally spoke, when I finally showed them what I'd been building in that silence, it wasn't with tears or pleas or desperate explanations. It was with evidence so devastating, with moves so calculated, that the man who thought he'd married a doormat realized too late that he'd actually married a woman who knew exactly how to destroy him. My name is Maya, and this is the story of how my silence became the loudest thing anyone in that family ever heard. I met Daniel when I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in finance and dreams bigger than the small town I grew up in. He was 28, already established in his family's real estate business, driving an expensive car and wearing watches that cost more than my student loans. We met at a charity gala where I was volunteering, helping coordinate the silent auction. He bid on a weekend getaway package, won it, and then asked if I'd like to join him. "I don't even know you," I said, laughing at his audacity. "That's what the weekend is for, getting to know each other." His smile was confident, the kind that came from a lifetime of getting what he wanted. "Come on, what's the worst that could happen?" I should have paid attention to that question. Should have realized that a man who couldn't imagine the worst was a man who'd never had to face consequences. But I was young and flattered and naive enough to think that confidence meant strength, that success meant character. The weekend was magical. We stayed at a resort in the mountains, talked for hours about everything and nothing, walked trails with our fingers intertwined. He told me about growing up in his family, his father Marcus, who built the business from nothing, his mother Patricia, who ran the household with military precision, his older brother Ryan, who was being groomed to take over the company. He talked about feeling like the spare, the backup plan, always in Ryan's shadow no matter what he accomplished. "That's why I need someone like you," he said on our last night, as we watched the sunset from our balcony. "Someone who sees me for me, not just as Marcus's younger son or Ryan's little brother. With you, I feel like I matter." I fell for it completely. Fell for him. We dated for 8 months before he proposed, on the same balcony at the same resort where we'd had our first weekend together. His family threw an engagement party at their massive estate, and that's when I should have seen the warning signs. Patricia looked me up and down with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Daniel tells us you work in finance. How ambitious. I do hope you'll have time for family once you're married. The Caldwell family has certain expectations, certain traditions. I'm sure Maya and I will figure out the right balance," Daniel said, his arm around my waist. But I noticed he didn't defend my career, didn't push back on his mother's implication that my work was negotiable. Ryan shook my hand with a grip just a bit too firm. "Welcome to the family. Word of advice, in this family, Dad and Mom's word is law. The sooner you learn that, the easier things will be." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. The wedding was 6 months later, a lavish affair at a country club with 300 guests, most of whom I didn't know. My parents looked uncomfortable the entire time, my father in a rented tux that didn't quite fit, my mother overwhelmed by the opulence. Daniel's family had paid for everything, and Patricia reminded me of this fact approximately 7,000 times during the planning process. "Since we're covering the costs, I think it's only fair that we have final approval on the guest list," she'd said when I wanted to invite more of my college friends. "We want to make sure the right people are there. This is a Caldwell family event, after all. My friends got cut. Her society friends made the list." I told myself it didn't matter, that it was one day, that marriage was about compromise. I didn't realize yet that in the Caldwell family, compromise meant I gave up everything and they gave up nothing. We moved into a house Daniel's father owned, one of many properties in the family portfolio. "Just until we get on our feet," Daniel said. "It doesn't make sense to pay rent when Dad has this place sitting empty. But there was always a reason we couldn't move. The market wasn't right. We needed to save more money. His father was giving us such a good deal it would be foolish to leave. 5 years later, we were still in that house, still under his father's thumb, still owing Marcus Caldwell for his generosity. I kept my job at first, working as a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm. I was good at it, got promoted twice in 3 years, was on track to make senior analyst by 30. But Daniel's family made it increasingly difficult. Patricia would schedule family dinners on weekday evenings without asking my schedule, then act hurt when I had to work late. Marcus would make comments about how Ryan's wife had quit her little job to focus on family. And wasn't she so much happier now? "It's not that we don't support your career, dear," Patricia said one Sunday dinner, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's just that family should come first. And you're part of this family now. That means being available when we need you." "I can be available and still work," I said, trying to keep my voice pleasant. "Lots of women manage both." "Lots of women aren't married to Caldwells," Marcus said, as if that ended the discussion. He cut into his steak with deliberate precision, not even looking at me. "In this family, we have standards, priorities. Daniel, I'm surprised you haven't made this clearer to your wife." Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Dad, Maya's career is important to her." "We're figuring it out." "Figure it out faster," Marcus said. "Your brother managed to get his wife on board with family expectations within the first year. You're going on 3 years and still having this conversation. It reflects poorly on both of you." I felt my face burn with humiliation. Not because of what Marcus said, but because Daniel said nothing in response. He just nodded slightly, like he was accepting a performance review from his boss, and reached for his wine glass. I was sitting right there, and he couldn't even defend me. That night in our bedroom, I tried to talk to him about it. "Your father was incredibly disrespectful tonight. He talked about me like I wasn't even in the room. He's old-fashioned. You know that. He doesn't mean anything by it. Doesn't mean anything. Daniel, he compared me to Ryan's wife like I'm failing some test. And you said nothing. What was I supposed to say? Argue with my father in front of everyone? That's not how our family works. How does your family work exactly? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like everyone gets to have an opinion about my life except me." He sighed. That particular sigh that meant he thought I was being difficult. "Maya, you're being oversensitive. My parents just want what's best for us. Is it so wrong that they care? Caring would be asking what I want. What they're doing is controlling. You're being dramatic." He turned away from me, starting to undress for bed. "Can we not do this tonight?" "I'm exhausted." That became his favorite phrase over the years. "Can we not do this?" Every time I tried to express discomfort, set a boundary, or push back on his family's intrusions. Every concern I raised was met with deflection, dismissal, or that infuriating accusation that I was being too sensitive, too dramatic, too difficult. So I learned to be quiet. Learned that speaking up only led to arguments I couldn't win, to being gaslit into questioning my own perceptions, to feeling even more alone in my marriage than I already did. But quiet doesn't mean silent in your own head, and it doesn't mean you're not paying attention. The first real breaking point came when I got pregnant. I was 26, we'd been married 3 years, and I wasn't sure I was ready, but Daniel was thrilled. His family was even more thrilled. Patricia actually hugged me, the first genuine affection she'd shown since I joined the family. "Oh, this is wonderful news. Finally, a grandchild for the Caldwell family. You'll need to quit that job, of course. You can't be working while pregnant. It's not healthy for the baby." "That's not medically accurate," I said carefully. "My doctor says it's perfectly fine to continue working as long as I'm healthy. Doctors don't know everything, dear. I raised 2 sons and I know what works. You need rest, proper nutrition, no stress. That means no job." She said it with such finality, like the decision had already been made. "Patricia, I appreciate your concern, but this is something Daniel and I will decide together." Her smile tightened. "Of course, dear. I'm sure Daniel will make the right choice." He did make a choice. That night, he came home with flowers and takeout from my favorite restaurant, and I knew immediately that he'd been talked to by his mother. "So, I've been thinking," he said as we ate. "Maybe Mom has a point about the job thing. We don't need the money, and it would be less stressful for you to focus on the pregnancy. We've talked about this. I want to keep working. I know, but think about it practically. You're going to need maternity leave anyway. Why not just make the break now? Take some time to prepare for the baby, and then we can reassess later. Reassess later means never going back, and we both know it. That's not true. If you want to work after the baby comes, we'll figure it out. I'm just suggesting that for now, for the health of our child, maybe you could take a pause. He reached across the table and took my hand. I'm worried about you. You're exhausted all the time. You're stressed from work. Is that really what's best for the baby? The manipulation was so smooth I almost didn't catch it. Almost let myself believe he was motivated by concern rather than family pressure. Daniel, my doctor says I'm perfectly healthy. The stress you're seeing is from your family's constant interference, not from my job. Now you're blaming my family for your stress? Maya, come on. They're trying to help. They're trying to control. There's a difference. You know what? Fine, keep the job. Stress yourself out. If something happens to the baby, at least you'll have your precious career to comfort you. His words hit me like a slap. The implication that I was choosing career over my child's safety, that I was being selfish and reckless, that any complications would be my fault. I stared at my husband, this man I'd loved enough to marry, and saw a stranger using my deepest fears as weapons against me. I quit my job the next week. Told myself it was temporary, that I'd go back after the baby came, that I was doing what was best for my child. But really, I was doing what was easiest, avoiding conflict, keeping peace, making myself smaller so everyone else could be comfortable. I spent my pregnancy attending Patricia's planning sessions for the nursery, where every decision had apparently already been made. I sat through family dinners where Ryan's wife Sarah would pat her own pregnant belly and smile sweetly at me, making comments about how she'd already decorated her nursery in the traditional Caldwell style. And wasn't it wonderful that our children would be raised with the same values? I nodded and smiled and said nothing. I was getting very good at saying nothing. My daughter Emma was born on a Tuesday morning in March. She had Daniel's dark hair and my nose, and she was the most perfect thing I'd ever seen. For 3 beautiful days, I got to hold her, nurse her, whisper promises about the future into her tiny ears. She was going to be strong, I told her. She was going to know her worth. She was never going to let anyone make her feel small. On the 4th day, she stopped breathing. They rushed her to the NICU, hooked her up to machines, ran tests. A genetic heart condition, they said. Undetectable during pregnancy. Nothing anyone could have done. She died in my arms on the 5th day of her life, while Daniel held my hand and cried into my shoulder, and Patricia stood in the corner looking uncomfortable. These things happen, Marcus said at the funeral, like we were discussing a failed business venture rather than my daughter's death. You're young. You'll have other children. Like Emma was replaceable. Like my grief was an inconvenience that needed to be quickly resolved so the Caldwell family could move forward with their plans for grandchildren. I stopped speaking almost entirely after that. Not consciously at first. I just found that I had nothing to say to anyone. Daniel would ask how I was feeling, and I'd nod. Patricia would make plans for future pregnancies, and I'd stare at her blankly. Ryan would make awkward jokes about trying again, and I'd leave the room. You need to snap out of this, Daniel said one night, 3 months after Emma died. I'm grieving too, but life goes on. We can't just stop living because something terrible happened. Something terrible. He called our daughter's death something terrible, like it was a car accident or a bad business deal. I need you to try harder, he continued when I didn't respond. My family is worried about you. They think you might need medication or something. You're not yourself. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to ask who exactly he thought myself was supposed to be after losing my child. I wanted to tell him that his family's concern was really just annoyance, that I wasn't bouncing back fast enough for their comfort. But I didn't say any of that. I just looked at him until he got uncomfortable and left the room. That's when my silence became something different. Not absence of voice, but presence of intention. I started watching Daniel more carefully, paying attention to things I'd ignored before, like how he came home late smelling of perfume that wasn't mine, how he took phone calls in his car in the driveway, how he password protected his phone when he'd never had a password before. I said nothing. I started watching The Family Business too. Daniel had made me quit my job, but they couldn't take away my education, my knowledge of finance and accounting. I started paying attention when Marcus and Daniel talked about business deals at family dinners. Started noticing inconsistencies in the stories, numbers that didn't quite add up. One Sunday dinner, Marcus was bragging about a recent property acquisition. Got it for a steal. Previous owner was desperate to sell, so we came in with a lowball offer and they jumped at it. But I'd seen the county records, because I'd started looking at county records, at tax documents, at every piece of public information I could find about Caldwell Real Estate Holdings. The sale price Marcus quoted was significantly lower than what the records showed, which meant either he was lying to his family about the deal, or he was lying to the government about the sale price. I said nothing. I just filed the information away in my growing collection of inconsistencies. Daniel's affair was almost pathetically easy to confirm once I started looking. He wasn't even careful. Late nights at the office that didn't correspond with any actual business activities I could verify. Credit card charges at restaurants and hotels on days he said he was in meetings. And finally, the emails. Because he left his laptop open one day and I looked, just once, and found months of correspondence with someone named Jennifer who worked in their property management division. "Can't wait to see you tonight," his email from that morning said. "Same hotel as last week. I'll tell Maya I have a late client dinner." I took screenshots, saved them to a cloud drive he didn't know about, and then I closed the laptop and went back to being the quiet, grieving wife everyone expected me to be. That's when I realized what my silence could become. Not weakness, but strategy. Everyone had stopped paying attention to me because they thought I was broken, defeated, harmless. They talked freely in front of me because they assumed I wasn't really listening. They made mistakes because they thought no one was watching. But I was watching everything. And I was planning. I started documenting every shred of evidence about Daniel's affair: dates, times, locations, receipts, screenshots. Every questionable business practice I noticed in the family company, suspicious property transactions, tax irregularities, deals that seemed designed to hide assets. Every conversation where someone said something cruel or dismissive or revealing. I opened my own bank account that Daniel didn't know about, slowly funneling small amounts of money that wouldn't be noticed. I reached out to my old boss, had quiet conversations about eventually coming back to work. I saw a lawyer, not for divorce, not yet, but just to understand my options. My rights, what I would need if I ever decided to leave. "You're being very thorough," the lawyer said, impressed by the documentation I'd already gathered. "Most people don't think this strategically." "Most people aren't married to the Caldwells," I said quietly. It was one of the few times I spoke more than necessary, and the lawyer gave me a look of understanding mixed with pity. A year after Emma died, Daniel sat me down for what he clearly thought would be a serious conversation. "Maya, we need to talk about moving forward. My parents think it's time we tried for another baby. The doctor said there's no medical reason to wait." I looked at him calmly. "Did you ask Jennifer's opinion on this?" The color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked like he might deny it, lie, gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. But something in my expression must have told him I had proof, that lying would only make things worse. "How long have you known?" he asked finally. 6 months? 6 months? And you said nothing? "I had nothing to say to you." He ran his hands through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. "Maya, I'm sorry. It was a mistake. It meant nothing. I was struggling with the grief and Jennifer was there and it just happened." It didn't just happen. It happened repeatedly. At hotels, at her apartment, in our car. I have dates, Daniel. Receipts. I know exactly how many times your grief led you into her bed. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. You asked why I said nothing for 6 months. I said nothing because I was busy documenting everything. Your affair. Your family's business practices. Every lie, every manipulation, every piece of evidence I might need. Need for what? For when I decide what I want to do with it. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You've been planning something. This whole time, while we thought you were planning. I was surviving. There's a difference. Maya, please. We can fix this. I'll end things with Jennifer. We can go to counseling. We can start over. Just don't do anything rash. Rash? Daniel, I've done nothing for a year except watch and wait and document. That's the opposite of rash. That's patience. What do you want from me? It was the first time he'd asked that question. The first time in our entire marriage. That he'd seemed genuinely interested in what I wanted rather than what his family wanted, or what he wanted, or what was most convenient. I want you to understand that my silence wasn't weakness. It was me giving you rope, and you used every inch of it to hang yourself. The next family dinner was 2 days later. I went as I always did, quiet and compliant on the surface. Patricia made her usual comments about how pale I looked, how I really should try to take better care of myself. Didn't I want to be healthy for the next baby? Ryan's wife, Sarah, announced her second pregnancy. Their first child was 18 months old, and everyone cooed appropriately. Daniel sat beside me, tense, waiting to see what I would do with the information I had. I said nothing. I just ate my dinner and observed, but Daniel was unraveling. He kept looking at me nervously, like I was a bomb that might explode at any moment. He drank too much wine. He snapped at his brother over something trivial. By the end of the night, even Marcus noticed. "What's gotten into you?" Marcus asked Daniel as we were leaving. "You're acting strange." "I'm fine, Dad. Just tired." "Tired? You're 29 years old, not 60. When I was your age, I was working 18-hour days and raising 2 kids. Maybe if you spent less time on whatever is distracting you and more time on business, you wouldn't be so tired." I watched Daniel's jaw clench, watched him bite back whatever he wanted to say to his father, watched him swallow his pride and nod like a scolded child. And I realized something important. Daniel was just as trapped by his family as I was. The difference was that he'd chosen to trap me with him rather than fight for freedom for either of us. That's when I knew I was leaving. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. I just needed the timing to be right. The opportunity came 3 months later. Marcus called a family meeting, which really meant Daniel, Ryan, their wives, and Patricia gathering in the estate's formal dining room to discuss business matters. This was unusual. Normally, the business stayed between Marcus and his sons. Having the wives present meant something significant was happening. "I'm restructuring the company," Marcus announced. "Ryan will take over as CEO when I retire next year. Daniel, you'll remain as VP of Acquisitions, but you'll report directly to Ryan." I watched Daniel's face, saw the flash of anger, of hurt, of feeling overlooked again. This was what he'd feared his whole life, being permanently positioned as the lesser son, the backup, the one who wasn't quite good enough. "What about equity distribution?" Ryan asked. "Will that change?" "Ryan will have controlling interest, 51%. Daniel will have 30%. The remaining 19% stays with me until I die, at which point it will be split between my sons." "That's not fair," Daniel said, his voice tight. "I've worked just as hard as Ryan. Why does he get controlling interest?" "Because he's proven himself more reliable, more stable. He has a family, a wife who understands her role, children to carry on the Caldwell name. You have," Marcus gestured vaguely at me, "unresolved personal issues." Unresolved personal issues. My dead daughter and my grief were unresolved personal issues that cost Daniel his equal share in the family business. "That's not Maya's fault," Daniel said. And I was surprised to hear him defend me, even weakly. "Isn't it? She's been in mourning for over a year. She refuses to move forward, to try for another child. Sarah lost a pregnancy before their son was born, and she bounced back within weeks. Your wife's excessive grief suggests instability, and that reflects on you." I felt all eyes turn to me, waiting for my reaction, waiting for me to cry or apologize or shrink under the weight of their judgment. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I laughed, It was a short, sharp sound that cut through the tension in the room like a knife. Everyone stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Did I say something amusing? Marcus asked, his voice cold. You did, actually. I looked directly at him, holding his gaze for the first time in years. You're blaming me for Daniel's failures, for his lack of reliability and stability. That's very amusing. Maya, Daniel said quietly, a warning in his voice. No, I want to hear this, Marcus said. Please, Maya, enlighten us. What failures? Well, there's the affair for starters. Did you know your son has been sleeping with Jennifer from property management for the past year? Or were you not aware that he's been charging hotel rooms and dinners with her to his company card? Which means those expenses show up in your books as business expenses. That's fraud, by the way. Tax fraud specifically. The silence in the room was absolute. Daniel had gone white. Patricia's mouth hung open. Ryan looked between his brother and me with an expression of shock. That's a serious accusation, Marcus said slowly. It's a documented fact. I have copies of credit card statements, hotel security footage, emails, text messages. Would you like to see them? You've been spying on your husband? I've been paying attention. There's a difference. I turned to Daniel. Tell them. Tell them about Jennifer. About how many times you met her at the Marriott downtown. About how you told me you were working late when you were really with her. Daniel? Patricia's voice was shrill. Is this true? He couldn't look at any of them. It was a mistake. It's over now. It was a year-long affair that you conducted using company resources, I corrected. And it's only over because I found out and confronted you, not because you developed a conscience. Why are you doing this? Daniel asked, and he looked genuinely confused, like he couldn't understand why his doormat wife was suddenly biting back. Because I'm tired of being silent while you all pretend I'm the problem. Your son didn't get controlling interest because I'm grieving our daughter Marcus. He didn't get it because he's irresponsible, unfaithful, and careless with company assets. But it's easier to blame the quiet woman than to hold your son accountable. If this is true, Ryan said carefully, if Daniel has been using company funds for personal matters, that's a serious compliance issue. Dad, we could face audits, penalties. It's true, I said. And while we're on the subject of compliance issues, would you like to discuss the property deals that have been structured to hide income? The discrepancies between reported sale prices and actual recorded values? The shell companies used to move money in ways that look an awful lot like money laundering. Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell backward. You have no idea what you're talking about. I have a degree in finance. I worked as an analyst before your family pressured me to quit. I know exactly what I'm talking about. And I have documentation, county records, tax filings, LLC registrations. I've spent the last year building a very comprehensive picture of how Caldwell Real Estate Holdings operates. This is blackmail, Patricia hissed. No. Blackmail would be me threatening to go to the IRS or the state attorney general unless you pay me. I'm not asking for money. I'm just making sure you understand that I'm not the weak, broken woman you all assumed I was. I'm someone who's been watching and learning and documenting while you treated me like I was invisible. What do you want? Marcus asked, echoing his son's question from months ago. A divorce. On my terms, I want a fair settlement. Not whatever pittance Daniel's lawyer would try to give me, but actual compensation for the years I've spent in this family, for the career I gave up, for the abuse I've endured. I want enough money to rebuild my life without ever having to depend on a Caldwell again. And if we refuse? Marcus's voice was dangerous now. Then I take my documentation to the appropriate authorities and let them sort it out. I imagine the IRS would be very interested in your creative accounting. And I imagine Daniel's affair would be very interesting to the Bar Association. Isn't he up for partner at the firm? Would they want a partner who commits fraud with company resources? You wouldn't do that, Daniel said. But he didn't sound certain. You're right. I probably wouldn't. Because unlike you, I'm not cruel. But I will do whatever I need to do to get out of this family with my dignity and my future intact. So you can either make this easy and give me what I'm asking for, or you can make this hard and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of family the Caldwells really are. Patricia looked like she wanted to lunge across the table at me. Ryan looked calculating, probably already thinking about damage control. Marcus looked furious, but also, and this was surprising, impressed. How much? Marcus asked. $2 million. A lump sum paid within 30 days of the divorce being finalized. And I sign an NDA that prevents me from disclosing what I know about your business practices. That's extortion. That's a business negotiation. You understand business, Marcus. I have information you want kept private. You have money. We can make an exchange that benefits both of us. And if I refuse on principle, I shrugged. Then I'll get whatever the divorce court gives me. Probably a lot less than $2 million. But you'll face audits and investigations and very public scrutiny. Your choice. Pay me for my silence, or pay lawyers and accountants and PR firms to clean up the mess. I imagine my option is cheaper. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. You've been quiet for so long I forgot Daniel married someone with a brain. That was my mistake. It was, I agreed. You all made the same mistake. You assumed silence meant stupidity or weakness. It didn't. It meant I was listening. Dad, you can't seriously be considering paying her off, Daniel said desperately. I'm considering my options, which is more than you did when you started sleeping with an employee and charging it to the company. Marcus turned back to me. $1.5 million? That's my counteroffer. $2 million is already below what I deserve for 7 years of emotional abuse and a forced career sacrifice. But I'll meet you in the middle. $1.75 million. Final offer. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Done. You'll have your money within 30 days of the divorce being final. But Maya, if you ever break that NDA, if you ever speak about this family or our business to anyone, I will destroy you. I'll tie you up in lawsuits for the rest of your life. Do you understand? Perfectly. I want nothing to do with any of you ever again. Trust me, I'll happily keep your secrets as long as you keep your end of the bargain. I stood up, placed my napkin on the table with deliberate care, and walked out of the Caldwell estate for the last time. Behind me I could hear shouting, Daniel pleading, Patricia screeching, Marcus barking orders. But I didn't look back. I just got in my car and drove home to start packing. Daniel came home 3 hours later, drunk and furious. You humiliated me. In front of my entire family, you humiliated me. I told the truth. If you feel humiliated by the truth, that's a you problem. How can you be so cold? After everything we've been through together, everything I've given you. What have you given me, Daniel? What exactly? A house that belongs to your father? A marriage where I had no voice? A family that treated me like a servant? The privilege of losing my daughter and then being blamed for grieving too long? I loved you. No, you didn't. You loved the idea of me, the young, pretty wife who made you feel important, who you could mold into what your family wanted. But you never loved me as a person. You never even tried to know who I really was. And who are you really? This cruel woman who threatens families and blackmails people? I'm someone who learned from the best. Your family taught me that power matters more than kindness, that money talks louder than love, that people will take everything from you if you let them. So I stopped letting them. I'm not cruel, Daniel. I'm just not a victim anymore. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. What happens now? Now you file for divorce. We use the settlement your father and I agreed to. We tell people we grew apart after Emma's death, that it was amicable, that we both wish each other well. You get to keep your reputation, your job, your family's respect. And I get my freedom and enough money to start over. And the information you have, the documentation, stays private as long as the money comes through. I'm not interested in revenge, Daniel. I just want out. I really did love you, you know. In the beginning, before everything got so complicated. I looked at my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, sitting on our floor looking lost and pathetic, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just a vast emptiness where love used to be. Maybe you did, but love isn't enough when it comes with conditions. When it requires you to make yourself smaller. When it means losing yourself to keep someone else comfortable. I'd rather be alone and whole than loved and broken. The divorce took 4 months to finalize. True to his word, Marcus had the money transferred to my account the day the papers were signed. $1.75 million. Enough to buy a small condo, to live on while I rebuilt my career, to ensure I'd never be dependent on anyone again. I didn't go back to my old firm. Instead, I started my own financial consulting practice, specializing in helping women understand their finances, protect their assets, prepare for the possibility that marriages might end. My first client was Sarah, Ryan's wife, who called me 6 months after my divorce was final. "I've been watching how you handled everything," she said carefully, "and I'm realizing I might need some of that same strength someday. Can you teach me what you did? How to protect myself?" I could have said no, could have washed my hands of the Caldwell family completely, but I remembered being Sarah, the compliant wife, the one who did everything right, the one who thought playing by their rules would earn their respect. I remembered not knowing I needed protection until it was almost too late. "Yes," I said, "I can teach you." Over the next year, I quietly helped Sarah set up her own accounts, document her own evidence, prepare her own exit strategy. I never told her to leave Ryan. That was her choice to make. I just made sure she had options when she was ready to make that choice. My practice grew. Women referred their friends, who referred their friends. I became known as the woman who helped wives protect themselves, who taught them that planning for the worst wasn't betrayal, it was wisdom. Some of my clients never needed the exit strategies I helped them build. Some did. Either way, they all slept better knowing they had options. I saw Daniel one more time, 2 years after our divorce. I was having coffee at a cafe downtown when he walked in with a woman I didn't recognize. She was young, probably 23 or 24, and she looked at him with adoring eyes. They sat at a table across the room, and I watched as he leaned in close to her, touched her hand, said something that made her laugh. He saw me before they left. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw him make a calculation. Whether to come over, whether to pretend he hadn't seen me, whether to introduce his new girlfriend to his ex-wife. He chose to nod politely and leave quickly, ushering the young woman out before she could notice me. I wondered if he'd learned anything. If he treated this new woman better than he'd treated me, if he'd broken free from his family's expectations, or if he was just repeating the same patterns with someone new. I wondered, but I didn't care enough to find out. That part of my life was over, and I'd worked too hard to build my new life to waste energy on the old one. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Emma, about the daughter I lost and the mother I would have been if she'd lived. I wonder if I would have found my strength sooner if I'd had her to protect, if I would have fought harder if I'd had more to lose. Or maybe her death was the catalyst I needed, the pain so profound that it burned away everything else, leaving only the truth, that I deserved better, that I was worth fighting for. That silence could be power if I chose to make it so. I don't regret staying quiet for those years. I don't regret the careful documentation, the patient planning, the strategic timing of my revelation. Some people might call it calculated or cold, but I call it survival. When you're trapped in a situation where speaking up only makes things worse, where fighting openly only leads to defeat, sometimes the smartest thing you can do is watch and wait and gather your strength until the moment is right. My silence wasn't weakness. It was the quiet before the storm. It was the held breath before the strike. It was me learning everything I needed to know about my enemy before I went to war, and I won that war. Not because I was louder or meaner or more ruthless than them, but because I understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people underestimate you. Let them think you're broken while you're really building. Let them think you're weak while you're really planning. Let them think they've won while you're preparing their defeat. The Caldwell family thought they'd broken me. They thought my silence meant surrender. They were wrong. My silence became their worst nightmare. And my speaking, when I finally spoke, was their reckoning. I'm 32 now, 5 years removed from that life. I have a successful business, a small but loyal circle of friends, a condo that's entirely mine with no strings attached. I date occasionally but carefully, with boundaries firmly in place and eyes wide open for red flags. I'm happy in a harder-earned way than I ever imagined happiness could be. It's not the fairy tale I dreamed of at 22, but it's real, and it's mine, and no one can take it away from me. That's what I learned from those 7 years of silence and suffering, that you can survive things you think will destroy you, that you can lose everything and rebuild stronger, that you can be quiet without being weak, strategic without being cruel, careful without being cowardly. I learned that sometimes the people who seem most powerful are actually the most fragile. Because they've never had to be strong, they've just had the luxury of being unopposed. And when someone finally opposes them, when someone finally says no and means it and has the evidence to back it up, they crumble. I learned that silence is a choice, and choosing when to be silent and when to speak is the most powerful choice of all. If I could go back and tell my 22-year-old self anything, standing in that gala falling for Daniel's charm and confidence, I'd tell her that confidence without character is just arrogance. That a man who doesn't defend you in small moments will never defend you in big ones. That family should add to your life, not subtract from it. That love requires respect, and respect requires seeing you as a full human being, not a role to fill. But I can't go back. None of us can. All we can do is learn from our pain, grow from our mistakes, and build something better from the rubble of what broke us. I built something better. Something stronger. Something that's entirely mine. And every woman I help do the same. Every client who leaves my office with a plan and a bank account and the knowledge that she has options. That's Emma's legacy. The daughter I lost taught me what was worth fighting for. She taught me that some pain is so profound it burns away everything false, leaving only what's real and true and essential. I was real. I was true. I was essential. And I refused to let anyone convince me otherwise ever again. That's the lesson my silence taught me, that the quietest voice in the room can be the one that changes everything. You just have to know when to stop being quiet. I knew. And when I finally spoke, the world shifted. They thought my silence was weakness. They were wrong. It was power waiting for the right moment. And when that moment came, I didn't waste it.